Subquery is a query that resides inside of another query. We're going to look at 5 examples in this video. So in this first question, we're asked for the first, last names of employees along with their hire dates of employees who were hired before their managers. And so if we look at the ER diagram here, we can see where employee information is located down here. And you might be thinking, well, where are we getting the information about the managers? And actually, that's also coming from the same table. So the manager ID here that you see employee is relating back to another employee's ID. So this is an example where we're going to relate a table to itself. Unique situation here, and this will require a subquery. So first of all, let's get this information in the select statement. We need the first name, last name, and hire date, and we want to get this from the employee table. Now, since I'm going to be relating the employee table to itself, I need to give these table names an alias. So this first one I'm going to call E1, and up here in my select statement I'm going to prefix each of these field names with E1 to denote which instance of the employee table I am getting first name, last name, and hire date from. So this is going to be the subordinate, right? Not the manager. So that all is coming from the E1 table, and then in my where clause, I need to specify the hire date of this employee. If the hire date was less than, and then here's where I'm going to need my first subquery, because I need to find all instances of employees that were hired before their managers. So where E1.hiredate is less than what? Is less than, well, we want it to be less than their manager's hire date. And so how do we get the manager's hire date? Well, we get that from a subquery. And so subqueries are select statements. They're going to be surrounded in their own set of parentheses. So I'm going to open up a parentheses here and move to a new line, and notice we're starting again with select. And so here, I need to get the hire date again from my employee table, but this time I need the hire date of that employee's manager. And this is the second instance of our employee table, so I'm going to give this an alias of E2. So we're E2.hiredate, or select E2.hiredate, and we are getting this from the employee table, which I'm giving an alias of E2 to. So E1 is going to be my subordinates, my employees. E2 is going to be my managers or bosses. And then we need a where statement here. And this is a coordinated subquery, or a correlated subquery, in that we are going to relate a field from our subquery back to our main query, or our parent query. So where E1.managerID, and again, let's look at our ER diagram here. Here's the manager ID, which is not a primary key field. It relates back to a primary key field of employee ID. So where E1, so where the subordinate's manager ID is equal to the boss's employee ID. Again, this is the subordinate, the employee, this information up here, the manager ID field from that table. When that is equal to the employee ID field, which is the primary key of our subqueries table, then we have a match. That's what I'm looking for. So I'm going to close that parenthesis. So my entire subquery is nested inside of this set of parentheses. This is formulated just like any other query. It's just inside of parentheses, and it's indented to that indent spot 8 spaces in. And now we can end our statement and test that query. So there are 2 employees in the database who were hired before their bosses were hired. A rare circumstance, but we have 2 of them working at the company. And if we save answer, there's our 10 out of 10 score. Let's go down and look at this number 9. This next example requires a subquery in our select clause. If we look at the previous example we went through, our subquery resided inside of our where clause. And subqueries can be part of the select clause, the from clause, or the where clause. So in this one it will be in the select clause. So this one's involved, and so we're just going to put in some placeholders for now. We're asked for the total amount of purchases made in 2015. Employee ID, first and last name. So we're going to have 4 columns in this query. That first one is going to be some subquery that retrieves the total purchases by employee. And then a comma, and then we're going to need the employee ID field, we're going to need a first name field, and we're going to need a last name field. And this is coming from the employee table. Okay, so this is the structure of our query, and so the bulk of the time we're going to spend on this one is creating this subquery. This is an involved subquery, but we can do it. So let's get started. So our subquery needs to start with an open parentheses and then a closing parentheses. So inside of these parentheses is going to be the body of our subquery, and we're going to give this subquery a alias of total purchases. That's up here in the instructions. Name the column total purchases when you create it. So that's going to be our alias, and that's going to need a comma after it because we have these remaining fields following. So we're asked for the total amount of purchases. And if we look at our ER diagram, we're actually going to need to use 3 different tables here. First, the employee table, and each employee is making purchases, right? Now this is not sales, this is not the purchase of a pair of shoes from a customer. This is an employee buying things like office supplies or raw materials or inventory. And so each purchase is designated an employee who's making that purchase, so that's the link there. And then each purchase can have multiple line items on there. So you might buy some, red leather and brown leather from a certain leather provider if you're manufacturing shoes. And to get the sum of the purchases, we need to multiply 2 fields. We need to multiply quantity times purchase price. So if they buy 5 pounds of leather at, $30 a pound, then that multiplication needs to take place in order to get the total amount of the purchase. So because down here in our purchase, we don't see any field for total purchase amount, do we? No, the purchase price times the quantity is where we're going to get the amount of the purchase. And these 2 tables are related to each other on their purchase ID field. So let's go back here. And so we need to get the start our subquery with a select statement, and we're asked to round this number. We're rounding the total purchases to 2 decimal places. And what are we rounding? We're rounding the sum of PI, that's an alias I'm going to give to our purchase items table. Purchase price is the field there. We want to multiply that by PI.quantity. That's going to give us the total purchase amount. So that's what we're summing. And then my comma 2 is going to be with respect to my round function. I want to round this to 2 decimal places. So that's the single field that I'm going to retrieve from my subquery. And where is this data coming from? It's coming from the purchase item table, which I'm giving an alias of PI to. I need to join that to my purchase table, which I'll give an alias of P to. And how are those 2 tables joined on PI.purchaseID equals P.purchaseID? We need to join another table. We need to join the employee table. So here is another example where my subquery and my main query are both going to use the employee table. So I need to give these different aliases. In my subquery, I'm going to give the employee table an alias of E2. In my main table, I'm going to give it an alias of E1. And so I need to prefix each of these fields with E1 so that my main query knows I need to retrieve employee ID, first name, and last name from my this instance of the employee table. Okay, so I'm joining an employee table and giving it an alias of E2. And how is that joined? On the fact that E2.employee ID is related to the employee ID in the purchase table. So if we look again here, we see here's the employee ID in the purchase table. That's my foreign key. It's related to my primary key of my employee table. And then we need to start our where clause. And in our where clause, we first need to correlate this subquery to my main query. And so I have an employee ID in both my subquery and my main query. So where my E2.employee ID is equal to my E1.employee ID. And so what's this doing? This is relating my subquery to my main query, so that when I see employee ID, first name, last name, and then this result from this big subquery here, I know that I'm going to get just the purchases made by this particular employee with this employee ID, first name, and last name. That's what's going on here. And so that's our first criteria. Our second criteria is going to be that date that we see listed there. We need the purchases made in 2015. And so that's going to be, we're going to have to extract the year from our purchase date. And purchase date is located in the purchase table, which I've given an alias of P2. And when that is equal to 2015, then our criteria is met. And then I am done with my subquery. So this closing parentheses corresponds to this opening parentheses. Everything enclosed in here is my subquery. And I can bring this back. I already had put that parentheses in there. And I'm giving this subquery an alias of total purchases. So we did a lot of typing here. Let's test this query and see if it runs. Okay. So I'm getting a list of employee IDs here along with the total amount of purchases they've made. And if we see a null value for total purchases, that means that an employee like Lucas McDougald is not responsible for purchases. And so the only times we're seeing values in here is employees that maybe work for the accounting department are actually making the purchases. And there's a way to just show the employees that have made purchases. We're not asked to do this in this query. So let's save the answer and see if we got everything. And there it is, a 10 out of 10, we did get everything. I'm going to switch over to the advanced query editor for a few examples here. And so let me put in some comments here. So we're asked to list the customer's last name, city, state, and the largest shoe size they have ever ordered for all the customers that do not live in the United States. So a lot of criteria going on there. And so this is an example where the subquery is going to be in the select clause that's mentioned to us. And it is a correlated subquery. So that means that we're going to have some field in our subquery that relates to a field in our main query. So what are the fields we need? We need the customer's last name. We need city. We need state. And we need a country. That's not listed, but it should be. We're going to want the country from that, so we can make sure that we're getting customers that are just in the United States. And then we're going to have our subquery in here. We need some sort of subquery to get. Let's finish off the rest of our query. We are getting this data from the customer table where the country is not equal to, and there's two ways we can do that. We can either do the less than, greater than symbol or the exclamation point equals. Either of those in Oracle SQL are the syntax for is not equal to, so where the country is not equal to USA. And so what do we need inside of this subquery? Well, we need the largest shoe size that they have ever ordered. Okay, if we look at our ER diagram, and this one uses a different ER diagram, the simplified one. This one right here. So the largest shoe size they have ever ordered, I don't see that inside of customer. And in sale we have item size, so that's going to be where the shoe size is. But the largest one they've ever ordered, we're not going to have a single record that represents that. And so we need to do a subquery to get that data. So let's start our subquery. We are selecting the max of sale.item size, right? The largest shoe size that they have ever ordered or purchased. We are getting this from the sale table. And now where? So how are we going to correlate this subquery to the main query? Well, we have customer ID in the sale table, and we can correspond that to customer ID in the customer table. So customer here is corresponding to our outside query, our main query. Sale here is inside of the subquery. And let's give my subquery an alias. Let's do 2 words, largest size. That means I'll have to surround this inside of double quotes. And that's it. So everything in our subquery is nested inside of these parentheses. And if we just look at the subquery, it makes sense, right? We're getting the max of the item size from the sale table, and then for a particular customer. Who is that particular customer? That particular customer is whatever row is being analyzed in our main or outside query. So let's run this. Oops, I chose the wrong database. I want to choose this Redcat one. There we go. So the largest size of all of the shoes that have been ordered. And if you see a null value, that's because either it's a null value for item size in the shoes they've ordered, or this particular customer has not placed any orders. So if Richmond Weeder had purchased, shoes of size 9, of size 10, and size 12, we're just going to see the 12 here because that's the max of the item size for that particular customer. Okay, let's look at another example. And again, I'll do some commenting in here with our instructions. So in this one, we're asked for customers' last name, state, and postal code for all customers that live in the same state as any of our manufacturers. Okay, so this is one where we're going to have a subquery in the where clause. So let's get our beginning of our query out of the way. So we need customer's last name. We need the customer's state. And we need the customer's postal code. And this is coming from the customer table where customer.state, okay, right? Because that's what we want to filter on. We just want customers that live in a particular state. And what states do we want? We want the customers who live in the same states as any of our manufacturers. So what we need in our subquery is really a list of all of the states of our manufacturers. And so we can use our in clause here, our in statement, excuse me. And so if anything matches in customer state with whatever list I provide here, and usually we see things like this. We see lists like this in N. But when we use a subquery in here, the results of that subquery are going to be the values that are, say, surrounded by commas. So our subquery is going to go in here, and we want to select distinct because we just want a list of distinct state names. We don't need a list of duplicates because we're going to have many manufacturers that work in, say, California. So we want a distinct list of the states from the manufacturer table. And the reason I prefixed these last name, state, postal code with customer, we wouldn't have had a problem with last name and postal code, but we would have had a problem with state because state exists both in our customer table and in our manufacturer table. So here is state and here is state, and so I need to distinguish which particular state I'm referring to. That's why I'm prefixing this with customer and prefixing this with manufacturer. So that's the extent of our subquery. If we just look at this subquery, it's a real simple query. We're going to get a list of states from our manufacturer table. And so if our customer lives in any one of those states, then we have a match and we will see those customers. So let's run this query. Okay, so all of these states, Indiana, New York, California, Arizona, Michigan, we would have a manufacturer in our database that lives in one of those states. Let's do one more subquery here, and I'll copy in the instructions. Comment this out. Okay, we need product name, color, and price for boots that have a price that is above the average price. And we're told here that this is going to be a non-correlated subquery in the where clause. So let's get started. We're asked for the product name. We're asked for the color, the price, and that's it. And this data is coming from the product table. Where, okay? So first thing we need isn't part of our subquery, but we're just looking for boots, right? So where the category equals boots. We just want boots here. And our price is less than something, right? Our price is less than what? Less than, or I'm sorry, where our price is greater than what? Greater than the average price for boots. Okay, and how are we going to get that? We don't have a field in our ER diagram with the average price of boots, so we need to get that from a subquery. So let's do our subquery here. We're going to have a select statement, and we're going to use our average aggregate function. We want the average of price. And we want to get this from the product table where category equals boots. Right? We just want boots in this subquery because we're looking for boots that are above the average price for boots. And we're asked to order this. We're going to order this by price descending. We want the largest cost items on the top. This should be all caps. Largest priced items on the top, the cheapest ones on the bottom. So let's run this query. And here we go. So these prices are in descending order, and you're going to notice once we get to a certain threshold, we're going to be done. And that threshold is $43.99. I can scroll up. Can't scroll down anymore, but the cheapest one is $43.99. And that tells us where about the average price for boots is. If we wanted boots that were below the average price, I could just change the direction of my greater than symbol to be a less than symbol. And now all of these are going to be the boots that are below average price. Okay, all the boots that are below somewhere around $43.99. So that's how we used our subquery there.